Welcome back to another edition of Tuesday's Thought. My name is Claudine Wilson, and I will be your host for the next few sessions. We're going to be dealing with the subject of mindset reset. But before we delve in, why don't you go ahead and tag somebody, tell somebody, share this video, and be a blessing to somebody else. So in our previous sessions, which were facilitated by my co-host, Dr. Crix McGrowder, she spoke about the mind globally, how it works, things that we struggle with, negative thoughts, and how to overcome those, how to compensate for those, and so on. So we're going to be building on that essentially in this thought, while looking at how we can more practically apply some of the messaging to further enhance a positive mindset. So again, our subject matter is mindset reset, and we'll just do a bit of an overview or an introduction in the minutes that are going to follow. So when we talk about mindset, we are basically talking about a broad set of beliefs that help us make sense of how we see the world and how we see ourselves. So there are two categories of mindset that I really want to focus our discussion in on this evening. And again, if you have not caught the session previously, which dealt with the mind by Dr. Crix McGrowder, go on over and catch the replay. She may have touched on this. In fact, she did touch on this briefly, but I want to highlight that for the purposes of our discussion today. So the two categories of mindset that I want to look at would be that which is a fixed mindset, or conversely, that which is a growth mindset. So when we talk about a fixed mindset, we're talking about something that's static or really concrete, something that is very much in black and white terms or in either or propositions. That is contrasted by a growth mindset, which is it is much more expansive, right? There's room for growth, to sort of use the same word. So let me break it down a little bit further in terms of an example. A person with a fixed mindset will use language like, I either can do this or I cannot do this. I am either qualified for something or I am not qualified for something. I'm either cut out for this thing or I'm not cut out for these things. So very regimented, it's going to work or it's not going to work, one or the other. A growth mindset would be articulated in this way. A person would say something like, well, I've never been exposed to that, but I can learn to do this, or I can challenge myself to achieve this particular objective, right? It's not something that I'm familiar with or accustomed to, but I have confidence that with some effort, I can make this happen. So those are the two distinct mindsets that we're going to be looking at. Now, believe it or not, our mindset is actually not something that's innate. So we're not born with the mindset that we have. In fact, the way we see the world and the way we see ourselves is really a function of our learning, right? It's a function of our exposure, our environments, the things that we've been exposed to. So it's not something that you can say, well, I was born thinking like this. I was born with this way of seeing the world. That's not actually the case. I was recently reading an article, actually, which further drew a distinction between two things that we often sort of use interchangeably. So two words that when we speak about mindset, another word that we often use as synonymous with mindset is attitude. So we'll talk about a person's mindset or a person's attitude. But in fact, in reviewing this literature, it interestingly highlighted that the two are actually not the same. When we're talking about mindset, we're looking at a more global phenomenon, right? It deals with how we see the world and how we make sense of ourselves and our potential in relation to that. If we compare that to a person's attitude, and attitude is really how we interact with the world. So mindset is how we see the world, how we perceive the world, whereas attitude is how you interact with the world, okay, and your surroundings. So your mindset is in fact a deeper, it is more related to your subconscious. Okay? It's a portrayal of who you are from within you, whereas attitude, it's who you are externally, right? It's basically how you behave. Your attitude is reflected in how you behave. And so it's important, as I said, when we're talking about mindset, it's more of a global, it's the bigger picture. Your mindset is actually what feeds your attitude. So this really gives life to that very common saying, which is that you are what you eat. Okay? So if your mindset is what feeds your attitude, if you have a negative mindset or a very fixed, rigid mindset, that is going to feed the attitude, which is then going to manifest in how you behave, right? It's going to manifest in your actions. So if you want to get your actions right, it then goes without saying that you need to make sure your attitude is right. And if you want your attitude to be right, you've got to make sure that your mindset is right. Hopefully, we're seeing the connection between those three. And so this is where sometimes you might hear a person saying, well, this is just how I am. This is just how I think, deal with it, love it or leave it, that kind of a thing. That kind of flies in the face of this notion of your mindset, or your attitude rather, being a reflection of your mindset. Okay? When I say things like, well, this is just how I am, take it or leave it, that essentially is a testament of the type of mindset that you have, which is very fixed, which is very rigid. And so this is where I want to introduce this concept of the reset, mindset reset. Okay? When we talk about resetting, in essence, it usually signifies a fresh start, right? A renewal, a refreshing, a reboot, to use a technical term. Some common examples, when we think about a reset, we can talk about a factory reset. For example, if you have a device, it needs to be repaired, it gets essentially wiped clean. That's known as a factory reset. Reset. It goes back to its default settings. Then you have other types of resetting processes, which are what I would call naturally occurring reset. And the example that comes to mind when I think of that is seasonal changes, right? When we move through the seasons, these are naturally occurring resets. So we have the resetting, for example, when we move from the dead of winter into the life bringing of spring, right? It's a renewal of life. The things that had died off down through the fall and into the winter are now being made new. And then finally, we have another type of reset, which is resets that are assisted or aided by external mechanisms or tools. So an example of that might be if, for example, you've broken a bone, right? And it's of such that you require some type of surgical intervention as a part of the treatment process, right? So when the doctor goes in to perform that surgery, etc., there will be a resetting of the bone so that when you're on the mend, as you begin the healing process, it will heal properly, right? And you will then have a strong, usable, if it's your leg once more, once that healing process is taking place. Okay? All of these are examples of different types of resetting. Similarly then, when we talk about resetting our mindset, just as in any of the previous examples, aside from the naturally occurring one, the reset will not occur unless there's a recognition that there is a need for it. Okay? So you're not going to reset something that you don't perceive requires a new start. Example that comes to my mind of my personal situation, right? So I'm not very technologically savvy, but I can think of many a times where the laptop or the computer has just presumably stopped working or is not functioning the way it's supposed to be functioning, right? And so when you call up IT or try to get some technical support otherwise, similarly with, Wi-Fi, my Wi-Fi router and all these things, right? What are they saying to you? One of the very first things that you'll be instructed to do is to reset it, reboot it. In other words, unplug it, right? Wait 30 seconds or 10 seconds, however long, and then plug it back in. And more often than not, interestingly, that is what will solve the problem, okay? But unless you recognize that there's a problem which requires that resetting, you're going to have the laptop that is perfectly functional. It has all this capacity to do all these wonderful things, but you're not going to be optimizing its function because it requires a simple resetting. And so it is in terms of our mindset. Unless we recognize that we are stuck in this rigid place, we are redundant, we are stagnant, unless there's a recognition of that, there will be no impetus, there will be no movement towards resetting that mindset. Now let's anchor this whole concept of mindset and the importance of it, and making sure that our mindset is right. Let's anchor it in some scripture. Okay, let's go to the text. So in the book of Numbers, Old Testament, Numbers chapter 13 and 14, we are given a narrative. We're told of a story. Now, for those of you who are Bible scholars, you'll be very familiar with this. Others of you who may be watching who may not be, I will run through a bit of a brief synopsis. So we're told in this particular story about 12 spies or 12 men, individuals from the nation of Israel, as they were journeying through to the promised land under the leadership of an individual called Moses. As they were journeying, they got to the brinks of it, okay, of this, their promised land, and they were sent in to go and surveil, to spy out this country which they were supposed to take possession of. Now, moving through the story, they were in that territory for 40 days. 40 days elapsed, they come back to give their report. Now they have amazing news. This is the place that is flowing with milk and honey. There are grapes, the produce is just so lush, it's bountiful, it's plentiful, it's amazing. This is everything we could hope for in a promised land. However, we have a problem. The people, the occupants of this land are like giants, and there is no way that we are going to be able to conquer them. It's, we might as well just quit while we're ahead. This is not for us. It ain't going to happen. Not going to happen. These people are giants, and we see ourselves as grasshoppers in their sight. That's how we see ourselves, let alone how they would see us. Now, Caleb pipes up. Caleb, which was one of the 10 spies that was named, he along with Joshua were named, spoke up and said, we are more than able to conquer these people. We can do this. We can go in and we should pursue. We should take over this land, right? Yes, there are giants there, but yes, we're more than capable of doing this. And so right there in that situation, you see an example of the tug of war or the conflict or the clash between fixed mindset folk and between growth mindset, right? Once Caleb makes his pitch, the people are still dismayed. They absolutely are losing hope. They're despondent. Joshua pipes up and says, no, 100%, we can do this with the Lord being our help. So long as we remain obedient and we do not rebel, we are more than able to take this. We absolutely should conquer this land. We should take this territory. It doesn't matter that there are giants who inhabit this. It doesn't matter that this is a strong, very well fortified city. We can do this. So once again, that conflict between the growth mindset of Caleb and Joshua and between the fixed mindset of the others. Now, isn't it interesting how a fixed mindset can deprive us of realizing full potential? It can deprive us of accessing opportunity. It can cause us to delay our destiny. Just imagine now, if you've rolled to the end of the story, you'll recognize that thankfully, by the grace of God, Joshua and Caleb's report prevailed, and ultimately they were able to possess this land. But just imagine how many missed opportunities, how many thwarted occasions we miss because of a fixed mindset, because of an inability to see beyond what we can see, right? Because of an inability, to access or to grasp in our mind or to embrace an attitude of abundance. And yes, we can do this because of our mindset. And so this discussion about mindset reset is so timely because particularly when we consider this time of year, we are in the home stretch. It's the last month of the year. We've gone through 2021, and for some people, usually when we do this type of reflection, there's two outcomes. The first is we are very excited about what we've been able to achieve, what we've been able to accomplish, and we are looking forward to what lies ahead so that we can build on the strengths and the opportunities that we made good use of and the successes that we achieved. And then there's the flip side of that coin, which is regret, a sense of trepidation, a sense of despair, a sense of inadequacy, and sometimes a sense of failure because of the things that we did not realize in the 11 months that have passed us. But I want to submit to us tonight, no matter where we find ourselves, whether it's in despair, whether it's feeling successful, or whether it's somewhere in between, there is always room for a reset. We absolutely can reset. We can make use of the time that we have left, even though it's only 1 month, as we look forward to a new year. And by the grace of God, we'll make it to see this another year. We do not have to remain stuck in a fixed mindset. We do not have to remain stagnant. Now is as great a time as any to ignite a reset. Many people will often speak about resolutions and will wait till January 1st to articulate these resolutions. But I want to submit to you that there's a better way. Simply by this changing, by the renewing, by the resetting of our mind, we can see different results. And so I want to leave you with 3 points of application. Number 1, the first thing that needs to happen in terms of resetting our mindset is, number 1, you need to assess your mindset, okay? Assess whether or not I have a fixed mindset or whether or not I have a growth mindset, okay? And so how do you do this assessment? How do you know where you land? Well, first of all, you've got to be honest with yourself. And as you do some introspection, you need to look at what fruit do you have to back it up. We can say all we want, oh, absolutely, I'm positive, and I'm a positive person, and I have all these goals, and I'm a growth person, all of that. We can say all that good stuff. It sounds good, but unless you can see the fruit of that, then that might not be the case. The second thing you'll want to do is you'll need to assess your position holistically. And so what do I mean by that? Take a stock on the whole picture of yourself. So that means spiritually, physically, emotionally, financially, psychologically, relationally, all of it. And determine for yourself, where am I in these areas? Because it is a fact that a person can be thriving and doing well and actually growing in one area of their life. So financially, you've got everything together. The account is balancing out, it's growing, it's looking good, you're on a budget, you're sticking to it. But then on the emotional side, you're experiencing deprivation, you're empty, you're drained, you're in need of healing, right? So take a look assess your position holistically. And as you do that, determine whether or not in any of these areas of your life, you have been hindered in some way, be it because of a fixed mindset or because you've just plain become comfortable. One of the greatest, enemies or the greatest hindrances to fully maximizing your growth is a comfort level, right? It's becoming too comfortable. It's becoming complacent. And some of us may find ourselves in that situation. Comfort zones are fantastic. They are wonderful. They're comforting, but nothing grows in a comfort zone. And so we need to assess our position. And so number 3, once we've taken those first 2 steps, assess our mindset, assess our position, the third thing is we want to assess our strategy. So you've identified where you land, you've identified the areas that you're in need of growth. Now you want to identify the strategy. So how do I do that? Well, I'm so glad you asked. I'm glad you asked because you are simply going to have to wait until our next segment for us to dig a little bit deeper into that thought so you can get that answer. But my prayer for you tonight is that as we have shared with you, certainly you will leave with something that will get you thinking about the areas in which you can and desire to experience growth, and certainly you will experience growth by the grace of God. Continue to keep a positive mindset and consider how your mindset can have an impact on your outcomes. So until next time, I wish you grace, and I wish that the peace of the Lord, I pray rather that the peace of the Lord be with you and yours until we see you again.